What's up folks, how's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well, and today we're going to be taking a look at the GMAX Ultra from GOTRAX. This is a high performance long range electric scooter designed for commuters. We're going to be taking a look at the key features of it, do a top speed test as well as a long distance battery range test to see whether the claims of going 45 miles on a single charge is possible. Now, the GMAX Ultra is actually the top range model for the electric scooter lineup available from GOTRAX. With a 36 volt, 17.5 amp hour battery, the potential maximum range is rated up to 45 miles or 72 kilometers, and that's in ideal flat conditions, no wind, and a relatively light rider. Now, I've been riding the GMAX Ultra for a couple of weeks now, and I'll talk about the overall performance and my real world range test that I did with it. But before we get into that, I'm just going to talk about the overall specifications of this e-scooter. Firstly, in terms of the motor itself, it's rated at 350 watts. Top speed is 20 miles an hour or 32 kilometers an hour, and it does have two gears. First gear is rated up to 15 miles an hour, and a second gear is where you're going to get your top 20 miles an hour top speed. It's also a more powerful gear, ideal for uphill climbs and steep slopes. Now, the total weight of the scooter is 46.3 pounds. It's primarily made out of aluminum construction, has IPX4 of general waterproof certification, so it's a fairly robust and sturdy design, and being collapsible, it's definitely convenient for easy storage and convenience when you're not scootering around. Now, there are a ton of safety and security features built in. Firstly, in terms of braking, you have a rear mounted disc brake that has ABS. That's controlled through a simple brake lever on the handlebars. You also have an integrated tail brake light as well as a headlight for nighttime riding. Furthermore, since this is ideal for commuting purposes in urban environments, there's a ton of anti-theft securities integrated inside. Firstly, on the forks or the base of the front wheel, you have a 4-digit combination lock, which has a retractable braided steel cable that simply goes in and out. You can loop around that on any bike lock or anywhere where you want to tie the scooter down. There's also by default a 3-digit digital lock on the display itself, which will also block out access to engage the motors themselves. Now, somebody could still walk over and start scooting the scooter just with their feet manually, but they won't really have access to the motors without that 3-digit code. Furthermore, when it comes to ride quality, you have 10-inch air inflated tires front to back, and they do a good job in terms of absorbing some of the debris and kind of rough road conditions that you might encounter, but there is no suspension or any kind of spring system integrated into the chassis. Up top, you have a basic set of controls, mainly 3 buttons, a power, plus, and minus. The power button, if you hold it down for 3 seconds, it will turn your scooter on and off. The plus or minus you can use to basically unlock the scooter with your code, and when you're actually riding the scooter, they will change from first to second gear. Now, fun fact, if you hold down the minus button for 3 seconds, you can engage the self-propelled walking mode at 3 miles an hour. So this is where you can basically walk with the scooter if you don't want to actually push it or use any energy to move it along. Right beside the 3 buttons, you have a little bell, which is great for commuting purposes to alert pedestrians or other riders that you're coming along. Great safety feature. And obviously you have the digital display. Really basic kind of overall system. You have information about your battery levels as well as how far you've traveled throughout your ownership of the scooter, as well as your current speed, and you also see information of when you change gears up and down. Continuing right along to the right hand side, you have our throttle controller. Now, one thing that caught me off guard is that when you initiate this throttle control, it actually doesn't go from a dead stop and initiate the motors. You do need to kick it forward a couple of times. That's kind of a safety feature that I find with most commuting scooters in this kind of category. But once you kick it a couple of times, you basically initiate the throttle and you'll start to engage the motors. And the throttle itself is a very responsive. The overall performance of the scooter is very zippy, I would say. And if you hold down the throttle to a constant speed for at least 5 to 8 seconds, you can initiate the cruise control, which is great and fairly convenient if you don't want to hold down the throttle if you're going long distance at a certain speed. Now, besides those key factors, in terms of my experience using the GOTRAX GMAX Pro, I do have to say it was really fun testing this thing out. I've used a couple of e-scooters in the past, almost 4 to 5 years ago, and I do have to say that the technology has come a long way in terms of overall usability, performance, and range. Now, let's talk about my real-world range test. Now, I weigh about 185 pounds, and most of my run was done on flat surfaces, about 85 to 90% of the time. 10% of the time there was a couple of different hills and slopes, nothing past 5 to 8 degrees gradient. The scooter is rated up to 15% gradient. Granted, you do have to weigh a lot less than me to go up that hill at a relatively good pace. Now, I did attempt some hill runs at around 12% gradient. Eventually, the scooter did kind of slow down to a standstill. I just weighed a little bit too much, or this hill is a little too steep. Motors aren't powerful enough, which is unfortunate, but at least I got to do a little bit of extra exercise and lose some of this weight. Now, coming back to my range test, which did not include any steep hills, I pretty much got 24 miles on the dot. That's where the batteries had nothing left. The scooter couldn't even self-propel afterwards. And one thing you want to make a note of is when the battery indicator starts flashing and you get that low battery kind of status, you pretty much have 4 to 5 miles left on the battery. And in those last couple of miles, the speed is greatly reduced, the power is reduced, and you'll eventually start going slower and slower and slower until you really have no juice left at all. Now, 24 miles is just over half of the estimated range according to the GOTRAX details at 45 miles, but that's of course in ideal conditions with a relatively light rider. And of course, I'm still in the early discharge phase of the battery itself. Perhaps if I get a couple of new charge and discharge cycles, that performance will improve, and I'll let you guys know if the range significantly improves as I use this thing down the road. But it's important to note, if you're a male, weigh over 180 pounds and expect to get 40 or 70 kilometer range out of this thing, you're probably not going to get it in most real world circumstances based on my experience thus far. Now, for me personally, 24 miles or a 38 kilometer range is plenty enough for my personal needs, and I'm really excited to continue using this thing on a very consistent basis. And I'm super excited to test out other popular e-scooters from Segway and other popular companies to see how the GOTRAX GMAX Ultra compares. If you guys are interested in a comparison video like that, definitely let me know. In the meantime, check out the description down below for more details about this thing that we've talked about. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure you've subscribed, liked, shared, as well as hit that notification bell to get our videos once they become available. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.